For the devout, there has never been any question that prayer has power. But what kind of power? How does prayer work? Now, recent developments in science have shown that prayer has a positive impact on our brains. But can prayer perform miracles? We'll then meet individuals who claim that the power of prayer has helped them survive in the face of some of the most harrowing experiences imaginable. We'll speak with doctors and scientists at the very cutting edge of prayer research. Science meets faith. Join us as we unlock the mysteries of the Church.
About the power of prayer. We're here at Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church in Brooklyn, New York, to speak with a man who claims that the power of prayer healed him from a spinal cord injury, Father John Murray. We'll also learn about what's distinctive and special about the Catholic approach to prayer. Is prayer not only psychologically useful, but does God actually answer our prayers?
Hello, Tim. Welcome to Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church. My name is Father John Murray.
I was a very hale and healthy priest living at a retreat house on the Jersey Shore, Long Branch, New Jersey. Went out for a walk, and one foot went into a pothole, and the other foot caught on the lip of the boardwalk, and I stumbled for about 3 feet and hit my head on the railing right here and broke my neck in 3 places. I never lost consciousness, but I was immediately paralyzed. My break, spinal cord cuts, came at cervical 5 and cervical 6. So I was paralyzed right from those vertebrae. The most depressing day of my life. Being told that I'd be in a wheelchair, being told that I have to get out of bed with what's called the Hoyer lift, and no control over anything south of my chest, really. I was paralyzed from the chest down. It was an accident. It was a tragedy, but God did not will it. God didn't intend it. God had nothing to do with it. When you have that kind of situation, I spent a lot of time in prayer, rediscovered the importance of meditative prayer, meditation, and even more so, I learned to surrender in prayer. In my prayer, I would say, Lord, I can't deal with this by myself. Come and help me. And I honestly believe that graces came to me, God's power, God's Holy Spirit came to me in response to my prayer. Not healing me the way I wanted to be healed, but helping me deal with my anger, helping me deal with my impatience. What I learned about the power of prayer is that prayer is powerless. Prayer has no power on its own. What prayer does is, in response to my prayer, God sends grace. God sends His Holy Spirit. The power of prayer comes in the response by God, and the response by God is always grace. There's all sorts of types of Christian prayer. The lowest would be prayer petition. Lots of Catholics get stuck there. Prayer petition is constantly asking God for something. And very often it's asking God for something in words that other people wrote for them. And so they'll pray those words from St. Ignatius or St. Alphonsus or St. Teresa over and over again. We say those prayers so that over a year or two, we're able to pray in a deeper way, dialoguing with God. We say some things, but we listen twice as much. Another important style of prayer is prayer surrender. The results of it was this deepening of my relationship with God and also diminishing of my fears, my anger. A great form of prayer is what you call Lectio Divina, where you begin by reading from the scriptures, reflecting on it a little bit, contemplating it, and then coming down with an action step. So prayer should always lead to acting out your faith. The ultimate form of prayer, of course, is contemplation, that your whole mind just is totally open and you allow God's grace to overflow you. Because of my faith, I was able to accept what happened to me, not just to accept it, to embrace the cross.
It's visible to everybody, by his wounds, the scriptures say, we are healed. So it changed his life radically. You don't see a bitter man there at all. You see a very positive man who can walk, but with a great deal of pain. But strength and determination come from his faith and his own prayer life.
We're here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love. Now, this city is no stranger to the power of prayer. In fact, by the late 19th century, Catholicism was Philadelphia's largest religion. Dr. Newberg is an American neuroscientist and the director of the Myrna Bryan Center for Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson Hospital here in Philadelphia. He has done extensive research on the power of prayer from a strictly scientific standpoint. Dr. Newberg is a prominent researcher in medical brain imagery and nuclear theology. His research is focused on the development of neurotransmitter tracers in the evaluation of religiosity. His book, The Principles of Neurotheology, offer a basic understanding of the latest scientific research on the effects of prayer.
Welcome to our center.
So much.
So come on, I'll give you a little tour. All right. When we think about how our brain works and what our brain is trying to do for us, and we look at how religion works and what religion ultimately helps us to do, we find out that they match up very, very well. The most important finding of what we have looked at with looking at all these different brain scans is that there isn't just one part of our brain that is religious or spiritual. There's not one little light bulb that turns on when we have a spiritual feeling. It involves many different parts of our brain. It's a whole network of different structures and functions that are a part of our religious and spiritual self. And since I'm also in an integrative medicine facility, we understand that the brain is intimately tied to the whole body. So if there is a religious and spiritual part of ourself, it's really everything about us. It's our brain, it's our body, and how all of that is very interconnected with each other. So in this video, what we're looking at is what we think goes on in the brain of somebody while they are doing a practice like deep, intense prayer. And what we think happens is that at the very beginning of the practice, they start by focusing their attention on the prayer. They increase the activity in that frontal lobe area, that attention focusing area. This begins to communicate with other areas of the brain. This blue area is a central area called the thalamus that helps different parts of the brain communicate with each other. And in this context, if they were calling forth an image, let's say the image of Jesus on the cross, then they activate the visual area of their brain to bring this image into their mind. Now, the frontal lobes also connect with another part of the brain called the limbic system, which is where our emotional centers of the brain are. And so we have very intense emotional feelings as part of these experiences. And as a result of all of these different areas of the brain turning on, eventually the parietal lobe, that orientation part of the brain, starts to quiet down and calm. And now as we turn to look at the top, down from the top of the brain, what we're showing here is that on both hemispheres, both the left and the right, we would expect the frontal lobe activity to be on, the parietal lobe activity to begin to shut down as they lose their sense of self, and these very central structures that are involved in our emotions like awe and joy, that are all often part of those kinds of very powerful spiritual experiences, become by their activity, that becomes very relevant in terms of the experience itself that the person feels. A lot of our brain scan studies have looked at practices like prayer and meditation and show changes in the brain, and particularly show changes in areas of our brain that help to foster positive emotions, help to reduce stress, help to reduce anxiety and depression. And if you do all of that, then you're going to help to make the person feel better emotionally, and ultimately that gets translated into a body that starts to work better. You have less circulating stress hormones, your immune system functions better. So for neurotheology to work, though, I think there's a couple of important points about it. One is that it really has to be, in my view, a two-way street. It is not just neuroscience looking at religion or religion looking at neuroscience, but it's really the two of them coming together to understand each other and ultimately to understand who we are as human beings.
Dr. Newberg gives strong scientific evidence that prayer works, that religion and science have much to offer each other, and the work they're doing at this intersection is both challenging and exciting. Coming up, we'll meet a man who was on board Flight 1549 when it crashed into the Hudson River, the famed Miracle on the Hudson. Did the prayers of the passengers and crew save this flight from certain disaster? Stay tuned for more Mysteries of the Church. Human beings from all walks of life have relied on the power of prayer. But what power does prayer have in the face of life-threatening situations? Can prayer perform miracles? It was a clear day in January 2009 when U.S. Airways Flight 1549 took off from New York's LaGuardia Airport. On board, 155 passengers were on their way to Charlotte, North Carolina, when the unthinkable happened. A flock of Canadian geese appeared above the plane. The plane collided with the large birds, clogging both engines. Now, the crew attempted to restart the engines to no avail. The plane, it seemed, was headed towards certain disaster. With no other options, the pilot Sully Sullenberg decided to make an emergency landing. The plane, however, was too low to safely glide to a nearby airport. Sullenberg decided, therefore, to ditch the plane right here, the Hudson River. Passengers and crew heard his voice over the PA system, "Brace for impact." What happened next would become known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Well, was it a miracle? And what role did prayer play in saving the lives of everyone on board? Up next, we'll speak with passenger Dave Sanderson to learn more.
Well, that day on January 15, 2009, I wasn't supposed to be on this plane. I was scheduled on the 5 o'clock flight. I was basically end of a 3-day business trip, trying to get home early to my family because I was traveling so much at that time. So when I got on the plane, nothing abnormal. I was one of the first set of passengers to board the plane because of my status with U.S. Airways. I was a top-tier chairman because I traveled so much. I was in seat 15A, and candidly, I didn't pay attention to instruction. I didn't know where the exits were. Didn't pay attention to the flight attendants. But it was about 60 seconds, a little bit over 60 seconds, when I heard an explosion on the plane. And it was a loud explosion. I had never heard anything on a plane like that before, so it sort of woke me up, got my attention. And I looked out the window, I saw fire coming out from the left wing. But at that point, I did two things. First thing is I prayed. First thing I prayed for is I hope that captain gets me down in one piece. The second thing I prayed for is the last person I spoke with, who was my client over in Brooklyn, to call my wife to tell her I loved her. And the third thing is I prayed to God to forgive my sins. I don't want anything between me and God at this point. We were going down, and candidly, I want to go up, and it really wasn't looking that good at this point in time. And so at that point in time, the second thing I did is I reached in my briefcase and got my wallet out and shoved it in my pants, because if something did happen, which looked like it was probably going to happen, at least they could be able to claim my body. And it was about 60 seconds after we crossed over the bridge is when we crashed. And I tell people that minute was surreal. I saw my entire life pass before my eyes. And I shared this with somebody who actually survived the earthquake in Haiti. She experienced that. We were comparing notes, and she had a very similar experience where it was that last minute is where you have clarity. I was seeing things back when I was a kid, from playing Little League baseball to sports and Boy Scouts and things, that my marriage, my birth, I saw everything with clarity in my life. And so I knew at that point in time, I thought maybe it's true. Maybe you see yourself as you're dying, see your whole life pass before your eyes, because candidly, I don't think anybody on that plane at that point thought we were coming back, because it was going straight down into the Hudson River. It was so quiet to hear a pin drop. And the only person you really could hear, besides the flight attendant saying brace, 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 was a lady in the back saying the Lord's Prayer.
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
And it was so loud, it was so clear. And I think everybody at that point was pretty internalized, saying, okay, checking in to see, okay, I may not be here, so I either need to call my wife or call my husband, but the one thing you did hear out loud was the Lord's Prayer.
Amen.
As we were in those final seconds before we entered the water. So it was one of those surreal moments. When we hit the water, it was a hard hit. He estimated he hit between 100 and 120 miles an hour. He doesn't know, I think, for sure, because he was focusing on the job, which I'm glad he did. But when we hit, I went back in my seat and up my seat. It was that hard of a hit, that skidded. And when it skidded, it tore some of the bottom of the plane off. It ripped the bottom of the plane off. So water started coming in immediately. And then somebody actually did listen to the flight crew, went to that closest exit, which may be behind you, tried to open up that door. So now you have water coming in from underneath the plane and water coming in from the back of the plane. So depending where you were on that plane, I was towards the back of the plane. Water immediately was anywhere from ankle to knee to waist deep immediately. So water was gushing in pretty quickly. At that point in time, but no one was losing it. No one was pushing people out of the way. I won't say it was orderly. The term I've used is controlled chaos, where people are moving fast, but no one's pushing each other out of the way. And I think one of the greatest lessons about this is teamwork, how people check their egos at the door and really pull together to pull it off. But I saw people climbing over seats to get out. So there's multiple pathways. And that's one of the things I talk about is, in times of a crisis, it's amazing how God opens up pathways for you. The skills Captain Sullenberger had to use that day was gliding a plane. The skill I had to use was swimming. That's when I jumped in and swam to the closest boat that I could find. It was the end of the wing. And when I got there, I got my backside in sore, and they kept me on climb, and I can't. Because at that point, I didn't have much strength left. But all of a sudden, I heard my mom talk to me again, because the word she hated most in life was can't. And so, I got one arm up and I felt somebody grab it. I got the other arm up, I felt somebody grab it. To this day, I don't know who these two gentlemen are. But they pulled me on one of those ferries. And if you've ever been on New York Waterways ferry, it's not just right there. It's maybe 6 to 8 feet up. These guys were pulling me up on this ferry. I don't know how they did it, but they threw me over the side. I'm sliding on the ice in the ferry. I didn't even know where I'm at now. Now they're getting up, telling me, get up. And I got to the side of the ferry, and I'm like, man, I made it. But that I didn't. That was really the moment for me. When we talk about that moment you think you're gonna die, that was one of the moments. Because I don't know if anybody has ever been in, like I was, in water for that long, but it takes everything out of you. I couldn't breathe. I was so cold. No one lost their heads that day on that plane. I think God's hands were all over that plane in many different ways. Whether you believe in a greater being or not, and I do, I think God's message that day was, I'm still here. As bad as things were in 2009 in this country, in the United States, maybe people need to see a visual miracle to still believe that there's a greater being. And candidly, I think that's what happened that day.
There's no question that Flight 1549 could have ended in disaster. But was it a miracle? What we can say for sure is that for passengers like Dave Sanderson, divine intervention was certainly at play. Coming up, we'll continue our exploration of the power of prayer by interviewing Dr. Nitin Ram, researched the effects of prayer and faith on newborn babies. Stay tuned for more Mysteries of the Church. While Dr. Newberg has studied the effects of prayer on the brain, Dr. Nitin Ram, a neonatologist from New York's Methodist Hospital, has studied the effects of prayer and faith on the healing rate of humanity's most vulnerable members, newborn babies.
The energy of love is the strongest energy, I firmly believe, as a newborn baby doctor, that can exist on planet Earth. And I believe that prayer puts into us this energy by removing our conditioning, by removing our ego, so that we can express this uninhibited love. It actually makes us much more creative under stressful circumstances. That's because there is a part of the brain called the amygdala. This is responsible for the fight or flight response. And then what happens, there is a phenomenon called the Amygdala Hijack. It hijacks the entire brain and prevents rational thinking, prevents love and compassion from coming out. At interviews, when we face interviews, our heart is pumping. The amygdala wants to take over and hijack the brain. And this is where prayer and mindfulness can definitely help by preventing the amygdala hijack. I really believe that prayer works. As a critical care physician, as a newborn baby specialist, I see life and death every day. Tiny premature babies, some of them are not even bigger than the size of your iPhone 6 Plus. And there are these devastated parents. They expect this perfect baby, this normal baby, and then suddenly the mom goes into premature labor, rushes into triage, delivers this little baby, and her whole world has collapsed around her. She can't even touch her baby, feel her baby. She sees this baby in an incubator, 8 wires, 10 alarms going off. I've noticed that sometimes, both for the mom and the dad, most of the time actually, one of the grounding influences can be prayer. I feel it's really very useful. It is a form of meditation, because what prayer does is it takes your mind away from your anxiety by putting all of this into the hands of a higher power. prayer not only is useful for the parents themselves to calm them down and to give them some grounding, it also helps the babies. And this is because if you have a tiny little baby and the parent is jumpy, anxious, wide-eyed with pupils dilated and the hormones pumping, the baby senses the anxiety. But when the parents are much calmer, loving, kind, and compassionate, the babies really sense it. So in my experience, prayer definitely helps both the parents and the little babies in the long course that they may have in the intensive care unit.
We cannot fathom the divine will, nor do we know how that will works. What is most important, and we read this and pray it in the Psalms almost every day, is the need for trust and abandonment to that will. Very often, that abandonment will allow us to let go in time of suffering, when a person passes from this life to the next. In some extraordinary circumstances, that abandonment to divine will result in a total reversal of a seemingly impossible situation. How that occurs is known only in the divine will, in the divine presence. But the key thing is to surrender to that will, to give everything over to Him and let God be God.
Scientific research has shown that prayer has the power to improve and even prolong our lives. And as we've seen, prayer also is something that people can cling to in life's most desperate moments, sometimes with miraculous results. But the true power of prayer lies elsewhere. According to Pope Francis, prayer is not a magic wand. Its power lies in its ability to help us say yes to God's will, even when that will contradicts our own. Thanks for joining us, and tune in next time as we unlock more mysteries of the Church.